Bienvenue à tout le monde pour cette conférence midi de l'équipe de recherche sur les jeunes trans et leurs familles. Cette présentation revient en anglais, donc I'll switch to English right now. So hi, my name is Mathieu Manuel Degno. I'm a coordinator for a research team on transgender youths and their families. So today we are really pleased to have Manvi Arora with us. She's a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Montreal, and she will be presenting on the situation for transgender and gender diverse youth in Indian roadmap of health and human rights.
Good morning, everybody here. And today on this morning, we are here to talk about the situation of transgender and gender diverse youth of India. And we'll look at a little bit about the history of transgenders in India, what the current situation is. And in that situation, we'll try to locate where does a youth, a trans youth stand in this entire process. So
it should work. If not, I'll. Yeah, I'll just cut that part. And then if the remote doesn't work, I'll just act as a remote.
Okay. So next slide.
Exactly.
Okay.
We'll do this.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So in India, the gender fluidity or transgressing the binary model of gender is not new, is not a modern day concept like many other countries of the world for sure. But here in India, we trace it back to almost 4,000 centuries. And it was not only the gender fluidity was not only present, but also respected to the level of being worshipped in the country. So the first image that you see in this in the left corner, right corner of your screen is from a temple, where you see half body is of a male and half of a female, that's known as Ardhanarishwar, and is being worshipped in India. So fluidity was something not that was new to India, was not that was punishable, obviously not. And to add on to it, India has the world's largest transgender population currently living is there in India. There's a sizable number of a very visible form of conventional transfeminine transgender population, which is known as the Hijras or Kinnars or Jogatis, Aravanis. There are many names to it, local variations to it. And they are assigned male at birth who eventually transition to identify as trans women or between man and woman, neither man and woman. So this particular group has their own unique kinship system, their own institution. They generally leave the home of the biological parents and live with the community, where they have a leader, a guru, and chelas, the followers. And they eventually, over the period of time in Indian society, have been ostracized and marginalized by the community to the extent that they have currently only 3 options of employment: begging, sex work, and there's a different which comes from Hindu religion, is bestowing blessings or curses on the families, Hindu families, when a new child is born or when somebody is getting married. So they hold that power of blessing somebody. Their word has that power of cursing the family, but the other options the society has left them with just begging and sex work. So this is a little background that I'm giving about the Indian Hijra community, because whenever we talk about transgenders from Indian subcontinents, the research that comes out from that part of the world, the South Asian part of the world, it generally is talking about the Hijra community, the visible, conventional, trans, feminine transgenders. assigned female at birth who have transitioned to become male, or non-binary people or gender diverse people in the sense of non-conforming individuals have absolutely no visibility in India, whether it's about in policy making, in all the new legislative, progressive legislative measures that are being taken. They're all, even the policymakers, are keeping the Hijra community in their mind when they're talking about Indian transgender. So for India, transgender is limited, and with no offenses to the Hijra community, they're doing great work. That's why I have this picture. One of a leading Hijra activist has voiced their issues in the UN. So they have gone to that length. But Indian transgenders, whenever you say that, the vision, the perspective is only restricted to Hijras for the time being. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
One more time. Okay. So I was talking to you about history of gender fluidity, gender transgression in India. So as I've already told you that ancient India, gender fluidity has a recorded history of over 4,000 years and was celebrated and worshipped. In Mughal era, Hijras held important positions in the court of the administrator during the Mughal era from 16th to 19th century. They were also considered to behold religious authority and were sought out for blessings, particularly during religious ceremonies. But things changed completely with colonial rule in India, and the drastic change could be seen in the legal approaches when it tried to exterminate transgender identities through the sanctions of laws. Acts such as Criminal Tribe Act of 1871, and I think this is applicable to a lot of other colonies of the world, was a major blow to the otherwise accepted transgender community of the country, that it was criminalized under the act, and if somebody was seen dressed as a woman publicly, they could be imprisoned up to 2 years. That was the law at that time. Right after independence, this particular act was repealed in 1949, but the sentiment behind the law remained very, very strong for a very long time. The transgender people were shunned and ridiculed, constant surveillance, threat of criminal actions, prejudice, social intolerance, and lack of education and employment opportunities all combined to trap the transgender group in a vicious circle of isolation, poverty, degradation, exploitation, and violence. The criminalization of Hijra made them grow inwards. So until 1980s, we hardly see any mobilization for rights by this particular section of the society. In 1980s, a few community-based organizations started to crop up to voice their urge for civil rights and mainstreaming, but soon HIV happened. So all of you can understand that what happened thereon. The last decade of 20th century, HIV arrived in India, and this entire movement that was building up for human rights, for civil rights, for mainstreaming, visibility, was suddenly under the garb of a disease that this community was vulnerable to 5 to 7 times more than the general public. So this had its own positives as well, because there were health-based organizations that came in. HIV brought funding as well. So collectivization happened, but all of this was happening under AIDS control. National AIDS Control Organization became the hub for transgender human rights. Until 2014, I can say, would be the game-changing year for Indian transgender rights, where a Supreme Court judgment came, and in that judgment, the NALSA judgment, which is called popularly, it granted full citizenship to transgender people. People can identify with either as male, female, or others category, third gender category, through self-recognition of their gender. So now you don't have to go to a psychiatrist, you don't need a doctor's report, you don't need anybody's legitimation to what you think your gender is. This was a major, major achievement that happened in India. And following that, and there were rights being bestowed to the community with respect to education, employment, housing, marriage, adoption, all of that came in place with this particular judgment. Eventually, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So this was the landmark judgment that I was talking about. Eventually, we can see a spree of progressive legislative measures coming in place. And we can also see what positive we can see here is a political will to empower the community that was being discriminated for over a century now. So in India, there is a Transgender Protection of Rights Act 2019. Initially, it was a bill, and there were glitches in the bill. But activism came in. That's why activism is so important, because they were the ones who pointed out that these are the things that you've mentioned in the bill, but this is not what's working for us. So you need to change it before making it into a fixed act. So that happened. The changes were made. And now, in 2022, after 34 long years, a new national education policy came in. This is the first national education policy that talks about transgender education, although just a 6-line paragraph, but still it mentioned about working on stopping dropouts of transgender, and not only just a verbal thing, it dedicated a fixed amount of funds for the same, but the funds are being shared with the women's education and the trans right education. So unintentionally, the act has pitched women's rights group versus trans rights group face on. Then we recently had Indian Standard of Care, number 1, I saw. Before this, there was no nationalized, standardized guidelines for medical professionals, teachers, mental health professionals, the practitioners working with young children, pediatricians, endocrinologists. This ISOC 1 laid the guidelines for how you need to be working when you're working with a gender questioning, gender fluid, gender diverse, trans child. So it clearly laid it down there, although it is still in acceptance. I mean, all of this is there on paper, but acceptance on the ground level is something that the work is still going on and would need many, many more efforts to continue. In 2022, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment came up with this online portal for registration of trans people for a trans ID card. And with that ID card, this portal guarantees welfare, setting up of shelter homes, insurances, scholarship, training and employment, composite mental health, and conducting awareness programs for society. So before this, with an exception of 1 or 2 states here and there was no insurance, health insurance for people. So you can understand no health insurance means the entire cost of gender affirmative medical care has to be borne by the individual themselves. And as I told you that the community is already not very well accepted in Indian society, so there were unscientific ways, there were street hormones available, they still are, and these were the alternate to the costly medical treatment for gender affirmative care that is available in mostly private hospitals of the country. So there's another positive step that is being coming up there. As we are talking, there's a center of excellence being set up in India's one of the major medical health institutions by Ministry of Health, which is looking at transgender health from a comprehensive angle. So you have endocrinology you have surgery, you have pediatrician, you have mental health practitioners, voice, everything under one roof. And the aim is to replicate such centers in almost every province of the country. So it's a top-down, trickle-down approach that they are focusing at. So this is generally about the milieu of Indian society towards transgenders. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So now we come particularly to youth. I mean, that's what we are here today. And the chair that I represent and the work that I've done in my past has been with trans children, trans youth. So talking about Indian youth is not that easy, because Indian youth is not something that's that homogeneous for me to be defining it. So this image you can see decked up in multinational brands, jeans and jacket and bag, and going to maybe an IT institution. That's also Indian youth. And somebody would be married at the age of 17 or 18 and has their firstborn in their hand when they are 18 is also Indian youth. We would see Indian youth who are raising their voices for their rights, for social change, mobilization. That's also Indian youth. And somebody who is working in the farms, could not continue their education or have to get into early employment, and that too in definitely not in the sector, I mean, white collar job, definitely not. So an informal sector employment is also Indian youth. So there's a lot of diversity. And here I would like to make a little disclaimer here that we are here not making generalizations. So whatever we are presenting here today cannot be generalized to entire youth of India or trans youth of India. I mean, we are generally talking about some of the examples, some of the voices, and getting an impression of what is the current situation, but we are here not to make generalizations. I mean, obviously, the chair that I represent is about heterogeneous individual identities. So we are in no position to make generalizations. Next slide, please. Okay. So adolescence or youth, as we say, is physical, biological, in the sense that everybody goes through puberty. That's something which is universal and cannot be denied. But other aspects of youth, other aspects of adolescence, such as social roles that are bestowed on you by the society, changes when you are a child and when you are stepping into adulthood. So this transition between childhood and adulthood is what adolescence is. The transitional phase between childhood and adulthood, that's adolescence. In this period, you're assumed to be having cognitive changes. You have advanced cognitive abilities now, better than what were there with you in childhood. You have emotional changes going on when you're in your youth, because now you look at yourself, the concept of self-image, identity development, self-identity, they are developing. Your relationship with your peers is getting stronger. Your relationship with the adults of the society is changing. That permutation and combination there is changing. So all of these changes are taking place. And what people from psychology would know, Stanley Hall once called adolescence, youth as the age of stress and storm. So it is also associated with rebel. So if we are looking at adolescence from the perspective of Stanley Hall, from rebel, from stress and storm, I would say adolescence did not exist in India 50 years ago. There was no adolescence in India. Why am I saying that? Yeah, because 50 years from now, the transition between childhood and adulthood, which is known as adolescence, was very, very smooth. It was linear, it was organic. It was not this elongated age of pre-puberty and post-adolescence, this challenging age, which is elongated now. it never existed in India. I mean, so we can say that Indians never had adolescence and never had youth 50 years from now, because a young girl was already helping their mother in child rearing the younger siblings. The boy of the family was already at a very young age of 6, 7, 8, was accompanying the father to the farm. So was the girls of the family, the wives, the mothers, the young daughters. So this transition between childhood and adulthood, this fancy phrase of adolescence, actually never existed in India and still doesn't in many geographical regions and in many classes, economic classes, and to the extent based on gender also. It still doesn't exist. So now with the information age, with access to social media, with access to globalization, and you get to see what's happening in the entire world, we would say that aping the Western adolescence, there are things that are happening in India now, but India as a society, India's attitude toward adolescence, youth, has always been very doubtful and of mistrust. Adolescent in India was never seen as the age group of potential and challenges and working towards being adulthood. It is still being seen with doubt and mistrust. So same is being carried forward. You can imagine if a cis child is being looked with mistrust, a trans child coming to you and telling you that they're exploring their sexuality, they're exploring their gender. And coming to that, I would like to also mention here in a very quick, I'll just take 1 or 2 seconds. Indian philosophy talks about ashram dharma, which is a way of life according to Indian philosophy. Like we have stages, Erickson's life stages. In India, the life stages are divided into 4 parts. First is brahmacharya. So from 0 to 25, you're in that age group. And so youth also falls there. In that age group, you have to focus on self-discipline. You have to focus on achieving your self-actualizing tendencies, reaching your own best potential, and do not get distracted by things like exploring sexual options, exploring gender, gender spectrum. So celibacy is a part of it. And after 25 comes grihast jivan, which is family life. So it's then that sexuality should come in. It's then that gender should come in. And going out of the gender non-binary, no, that's still not possible. That's not going to be possible in your entire life also. So with that mindset, Indians still believe that children, why do we need to talk about sexuality with children in schools? I mean, children are asexual, right? And why do you need sexuality education and comprehensive sexuality education? No, we don't need any of it. So, and if children are, today's child with a social media phone in his hand is on Tinder, so that's where the mistrust begins. There are a lot of challenges that Indian transgender and gender diverse youth in particularly face. We've talked about transgender in India, the adults, the 18 plus. Here, the challenges when it comes to gender diverse youth are a little peculiar than the adult transgender also, because we see some really progressive legislative developments taking place in the country, whether it's on the medical front, it's on the legal front, the rights, the legal autonomy of a human being, educational changes. We talked about national education policy, talking about transgender education. All of that is happening, but all of that is happening for 18 plus. For below 18, I am very sorry to say, but there's not much that's happening right now in the country. And socially, I told you, India is very, in a sense, not very comfortable with the concept of youth till now. And parents, they are ill-equipped, not very aware of what is going on with the child when the child is questioning their gender, their sexuality. As Dr. Pullen is here, Dr. Annie has has proved in her seminal work that parents don't generally mean harm of the child, but they themselves are not very aware of what's to be done when the child comes to you. They get double the amount of baffled as much the child is. I mean, the child is questioning as it's scared, but the parents get double the anxiety, thinking of what the society would say, what the relatives would say, what the neighbors would say, what is the medical system. I don't know anything about it. And in country like India, where till recently there was no, there was no constitutional recognition to being a trans. So things get very difficult on the social and familial front there. I have friends who are working in the NGO sector in community-based organization who are into activism, but things get very difficult for them also when they are trying to help a minor trans. If somebody comes to them, because there are things like there are laws, very, very strong laws of abatement to child abuse in India. There's also which prevents which protects children against sexual offenses. So activists, NGOs who have good intention to help questioning trans children are often threatened with these laws. And we might say that nothing would ever be proved against them if this charges are actually laid, but the entire process of fighting that court case, the financial and the emotional burden on that NGO, that's something that they cannot really take bear. So 18 plus in India, you will get help, you will be guided, you will get psychological help, you will get medical help. But below 18, it's a very, very tough terrain, even in today's time. We'll talk about the medical aspect of it a little later, but educational, I can say that there is a change. We have a national education policy in place that talks about transgender education and keeping the transgender child safe in school, preventing dropout is up to what they've gone till now. So acceptance, sensitization, all of that is a little still far-fetched, but at least they're talking about preventing dropouts. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So Indian youth's access to gender-affirmative medical care. The prejudice, the misunderstanding of the caregiver. India, as I told you in the beginning of the presentation, has this very visible trans feminine community, the Hijra community. So as soon as a child goes to their parent and tells them that I don't feel comfortable in my gender that is assigned to me, the first thing that comes to their mind, because there is a visible non-binary option in the society, right? Who is begging and who is into sex work. So the first thing that comes to the parents' mind is, what do you want to do? You want to become a hijra? You want to go into sex work? You want to be begging on the street like that? So that is very difficult for the parents also to understand, because they don't know what are the options. The sensitization is completely missing. And as I told you, there are street hormones available. There are hormones available online. There are all sorts of unscientific ways of castration that's happening within the community and which are life-threatening, undoubtedly. The healthcare which is available currently is very expensive and is mostly available in the private institutions of the country. So rural access to people, and there was no insurance available till lately. It is only the last year that there's this online portal that has come up that is ready to provide transgender health cards to people and eventually will sponsor their gender-affirmative medical care. But till now, there was no insurance in just 1 or 2 provinces with an exception. The clinical program were very few in the entire country of almost 4 million population. There were 3 to 4 clinics, gender clinics in the entire nation. There's lack of legal support. We talked about laws that act as, abatement to child abuse. do not let the child access the underground kind of network, the help that's available. So that's a little baffling. Lack of structured training. I mean, transgender health is absolutely nowhere mentioned in the undergrad medical curriculum. So when a transgender goes to a hospital, it is there in the postgrad level, but in an optional course, not mandatory. So when a trans person goes to hospital, even for something which is not related to gender, a general medical situation becomes an educational moment for them, which is at times very annoying. I mean, you don't want to be educating your own doctor every time you go and visit a new one. So that's something that was prevalent. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, one more time. Okay. So the way forward from here would be from cure to care. Indian parents still are looking for cure of transgenderism that has happened to their child. We need to move from the cure to care, whether it's parents. There's no easy way to it. I mean, there's just one hard way of doing it. That's advocacy, that's activism, that's sensitization. So you need to sensitize the family that if your child is not comfortable with the gender that was assigned to them, there are other options. There is entire gender spectrum that's available to them, to you. So it's not beyond an end all of the world. Get sensitized, look for what needs to be done now and stand by your child. That's the only thing that you need to do. You need to sensitize the educational institutions. In a recent study by UNICEF and Sahodran, that's an NGO that's working in India, which had questioned the sexual and gender diverse students of India, the harassment rate, the bullying rate was as high as 78%. And when children approached their teacher about it, very less of them did. 33% went and told their teachers about it. Half of the people were told to ignore the incident, and the rest were told that it's your fault because of your own gender performance. You're inviting all of this on you. So you need to change your own ways. So blaming the victim, taking the neutral stance of not speaking up when it is required, not affirming the child's identity, gender identity when that's required. All of that happens in Indian schools. So that really needs sensitization. Schools in India, there's no national level guideline for it as of now. Some schools are taking individual steps of training their teachers, their staff about it, but they are one or two handful of institutions here and there in the country. Overall, national level initiative is still missing. Discourse around comprehensive gender affirmative medical care for youth is something that needs to be formed in India. The ISOC, Indian Standards of Care, has taken that one step of doing it. They have an entire chapter on adolescents, medical care. But in general, gender affirmative medical care in India begins at 18 plus. There's hardly something that's available for children. At 16 plus, you maybe can give consent for psychological help. That's it. So puberty repressing blocking is not at all available right now. And this is something that we need to look at from the comprehensive lens, to look at gender health, transgender health from a comprehensive lens in one institute, under one roof, in one clinic. You need to have everything available. Integrated clinics is what I'm talking about. So you have to have mental health present there for the child, for pediatricians present there, endocrinology, surgery, all of that, voice training, voice therapy, everything has to be there under one clinic is what India is proposing. And one of the esteemed institutions, medical health institutions, the research institution is coming up with such a model. It's already there in the pipeline. The work is going on. Sensitizing healthcare providers is something that we cannot go ahead in gender affirmative medical care for youth without that. I mean, curriculum needs to be changed for undergrad, and this cannot be an option in postgrad as well. You need to specialize into transgender health. So I think this is what the current scenario is. In general, Indian youth is not very comfortably placed, and when we take that one extra step of questioning our gender and questioning our sexuality and playing with it and exploring it, it makes the situation go even more happier for the parents and for the society and for the medical system there. So I think I would like to end my presentation with that.